Hey guys, this is Mr. Burrell, and this video will be going over the assignments, focus, and expectations for the week of April 13th through April 17th. So, if you're looking at the left-hand side of this slide, because as you notice, we're back in our NTI lesson Google Slide document, which you can access if you go to our Google Classroom. The universal idea for the week is isolation. That's going to be our focus. That's what each of our assignments for the week is going to revolve around. That's the universal idea that I want you all to reflect on. And the elements that we're going to practice, the modes that I'm going to have you write in, are going to be a 6-word story and a newscast. And I'll go into some further detail on what those look like, expectations for those here later on in the video. Looking on the right-hand side of our slide, our to-do list for this week. You're going to have already noticed, along with this video, that I'm going to have posted a quick writing prompt on isolation. That's going to be very similar to the writing prompt that we had last week. Just want you all to kind of reflect on what that universal idea is, what it means to you, what it looks like, etc. Just kind of get your thoughts wrapping around that universal idea as we work with it this week. I'm going to ask you to create a 6-word story that centers around our universal idea for the week. Create a newscast that reflects around the universal idea of the week. And then you're going to upload both the 6-word story and the newscast to Google Classroom by 11:59 p.m. this Friday. And I need you all to make a concerted effort to do that because I didn't get all the writing prompts from this past week at 11:59 p.m. There's still time to turn those in. So if you haven't turned those in yet, please do so. But I need, as we move forward, for us to put in that extra consideration in turning in assignments. That's how you're getting your participation. That's, how this is flowing is me getting those assignments on time. So moving forward, I'm going to talk a little bit about the 6-word story, what it is, some things for you to consider. I'll tell you where you can pause this video so that you can reflect on that a little bit more. We'll talk about the newscast. Same deal. And then, I'll wrap this up. But guys, the biggest thing, if the NTI lesson Google slide like instructions aren't informative enough, if these videos aren't informative enough, or if any of my examples don't really help you, please do not ever hesitate to leave a private comment on something or email me directly and ask me a question. You have my email address. You can always leave a comment. I will get back to you. Please don't just sit there in the dark or not do something because you're confused. Communication is going to be key during this time. So if you're stuck, if you need some help, please, the best thing you can do is communicate that to me. So moving forward, let's talk about the 6-word story. So the 6-word story is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. You are going to be creating a narrative that is conveyed in only 6 words. The most famous 6-word story comes from Ernest Hemingway, who, and this is like one of those, maybe it happened, maybe it didn't, but he came up with this short story when he was challenged that read, "For sale, baby shoes, never worn." I really like this one because this is the greatest example of what a six-word story can be in a lot of different ways. It, first and foremost, utilizes punctuation perfectly to do a lot more with those 6 words than just writing a 6-word sentence could ever do. The colon that he uses there is really helpful. The comma creates a pause that actually does a lot to kind of imply some meaning. And then just let's think about what's actually being said there. For sale, baby shoes never worn. What is he implying happened for baby shoes to have never been worn? Like it's not like the baby just all of a sudden decided that they didn't like the shoes. They're a baby. It's unlikely that the parents all of a sudden were like, you know what? We're going to go with these other shoes. They probably chose the shoes that they wanted for that baby. So it kind of begs the question, what happened to cause them to have to sell that? And then think about the tone, just these like short phrases: for sale, baby shoes, never worn. There's a lot loaded in just those 6 words. And that's kind of ideally what I want you to do with your own 6-word stories that you create. Some other examples: Rapunzel, I'm slipping. A wig? Misleadingly deep puddle. Curious child missing. I love you too, she lied. An artificial limb, bungee jump, bad idea. So some of those have some humor involved. Some of them are a little bit more serious. It's kind of up to you. It's where you want to take them. The biggest thing that I want you to consider, and I'll be moving on to the next slide here, is that beyond just the fact that your 6-word story has to be 6 words, which maybe duh, but you'd be surprised. I want your 6-word stories to be related to isolation, our universal idea for the week, in some way, shape, or form. I want them to reflect it. I want them to like kind of convey isolation in some form or fashion. I gave you the definition of isolation right there, just in case you needed that as a refresher or just to kind of pull from. And I want your stories to be coherent. I don't want it just to be 6 random words. Each of the examples that I just gave you, and I'm about to show you an example that I wrote, they flow. They're not just random words mashed together. It's a sentence that is understandable. It's an idea or a thought that is understandable. That is you can comprehend. So, looking at my example, which I already have pulled up here in the next tab, my example that reflects the universal idea of isolation is asleep or awake, it didn't matter. So, as you see here, I didn't use the word isolation. You don't have to use the universal idea word in these 6-word stories. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to convey that idea. And I actually drew some inspiration from some of the things I was reading out of your writing prompts from last week, where a lot of you were talking about how bored you've been during this, like, you know, month of quarantine, how your days are blurring together, how, not being able to see people, it's like you're just kind of doing the same thing and it doesn't really matter if you're asleep or awake. So your sleep schedules are messed up or all over the place. And so that's kind of where I got this story from, where I got my inspiration for this from. So you can kind of use mine as a model for what you can do. And again, you see that I used punctuation here to kind of accentuate and sort of support the fact that I only had 6 words. I kind of was able to create 2 sentences worth of thought from the 6 words that I had. So I'm going to let it sit there for a second. You can pause, you can go back through the video where you need to after this point, because I'm going to move on to the newscast now and talk about that very briefly. All right. So hopefully you got what you needed for the 6 word story. 'Cause now I'm going to talk about the newscast. Newscast is also in the name. There's nothing like hidden. There's no surprises. A newscast is what it sounds like. You are delivering information as though like it was like through news media. So you're taking on the role of a reporter and speaking about some kind of event, a current event. So, just like our 6 word story, I want the newscast to address isolation in some way. Your current event should be tied to that idea of isolation. Some tips for writing your newscast, and if you all, and a few of you did, if you all are familiar with journalism, or some of you took my journalism class last year, some of you have like a leg up on this, but this is for everybody. This can be useful for everybody. Just some things to take into consideration when you are writing your newscast. First and foremost, write like you speak. That doesn't mean slang, broken sentences, incomplete thoughts, the way that people kind of like drone on and on, maybe. What it means is write this as though someone were about to read it in front of a camera. So there needs to be a little bit of a natural flow. It doesn't need to be stilted. It doesn't need to be robotic. Include some actual style to it, because that's how the news is written. If you've ever just happened to watch like the 5 o'clock news or something like that, keep it simple. This doesn't have to be pages and pages. Honestly, most like news write ups, 200 to 300 words. So, really, not much longer than the writing prompt that I asked you to write last week. Provide specificity. That means be very specific. Don't talk about this current event dealing with isolation in vague terms. What specifically happened? Why is it isolating? Like, what are the dates? What's the where, the who? The 5 W's. And my journalism people probably are going to moan and groan when you hear that phrase, the 5 W's. But yes, the who, the what, the where, the when, the why. Tell the story in a logical order. Don't jump around. Tell things as they happened in the way that would make the most sense. Use the present tense and the active voice. Talk about the thing as though it were happening, the current event as though it were happening. You know, the when I'm going to show you the examples of things that you could talk about in terms of isolation, obviously COVID-19 is something that is a current event that is definitely related to isolation, and that is currently happening. So that is a very easy thing, if you talk about something within that scheme, to talk about in the present tense and the active voice. If you want to pull some pictures from the internet to include in your newscast document, which I would definitely implore you, I would suggest that you do, uh, write to them. Like, talk about what's in those pictures. Don't just drop them in for no good reason. I would definitely suggest that you do that. Regardless, use imagery in your writing. Tap into those 5 senses and let the speaker speak. A newscast usually has some kind of interview involved. Now, for your all's purposes, you can make up an interview with someone. Like you can have a quote from someone where they did not say that thing at all. You can even make up the event if you really want to. We'll get into that in just a second. But when you have someone talking in your newscast, let them say their thing. Don't just describe what they said. use the quote and then talk around that. So, going on and showing you some examples of current events that you can talk about. Obviously, COVID-19, interviewing people experiencing isolation currently. And again, your interviews can be 100% made up, and it's probably going to be easier to make something up given your current circumstances. And some of you are probably happier that I am allowing you to fudge this a little bit, given what some of you were asking me to do with your personal narratives way back when. Another example of a current event is a specific thing that's being canceled or postponed and how that can lead to isolation. Because remember, this all has to tie back into the universal idea or some other event leading to isolation. Because again, this doesn't have to be about COVID-19. And in fact, your other event that's isolation related can also be fictionalized if you want. You can also make that up. Be creative, please. That's kind of the point of this, is to be as creative as you can. So I'm going to show you an example from another teacher of a newscast. As you see, they embedded an image there up at the top. And this newscast is a report on the Hangout Music Festival being canceled. And it's kind of like talking about how this is sort of an isolating event or an isolating circumstance because they have an interview with a person where this person is talking about how it was like a chance for them to hang out with their friends, how like this music festival was a way for them and their friends to hang out. Now that it's canceled, like it's kind of making them feel like lonely and it's just another cause of them being stuck in the house during this whole ordeal. So you see how this relates to the universal idea of isolation because it's talking about you know the being stuck in the house, it's talking about them missing out on hanging out with their friends and how they don't even get to see their friends that much anymore. uh, and this is framed as a report on a current event. The teacher took on the role of a reporter, talking about the information surrounding this cancellation of this event, and definitely made sure to tie it into isolation. So those are your considerations for the newscast. So again, just to go back over your to-do list, posted with this video and with the reminder to check this Google Slide document will be a quick write on isolation. I'm going to ask you to create a 6-word story revolving around isolation, a newscast with some like current event dealing with isolation, and then you need to upload that 6-word story and that newscast to Google Classroom by 11:59 p.m. on Friday, 9/17. So, again, if you have any questions, please make sure that you ask me. Please make sure that you are getting in contact with me in some way, shape, or form. And do not hesitate. If there is like a lot of confusion and like I sense that we need to go maybe a bit more in depth with anything, I will maybe set up some sort of like class Google Meet like later in the week where we can have a discussion about things. I'll just kind of feel things out and see where we go from there. Also, I might create a forum of some sort where people can share ideas in case someone is stuck, someone can kind of take an idea and kind of go from there. Just a way for you all to collaborate a little bit and get some help from each other and not just me. Otherwise, I hope you all are doing well. Please make sure that you're turning these things in, and I hope to be seeing your work come in and to hear from you all soon. Catch y'all later, guys.